nothing you ever sell to your client should have a price or cost them anything, because what you do is actually providing them a return on their investment. You deserve to be paid based off of the value that you provide and not the time that it takes.
Hey everybody, today I am so thrilled to be joined by Mike Schmidt and AJ Rivera. Mike and AJ co-own an agency together called Anchorwave, and then also founded Agency Coach, where they teach agencies how to make income without putting in a crazy amount of hours. I'm really excited to hear this. They also created Funnel Hub, which you might have heard of through Russell Brunson of ClickFunnels' book. I'm ready to hear all about this amazing Agency Coach system. I'm sure you are too. Mike and AJ, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brooke. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, excited to be here.
I am really excited to talk to y'all because I feel like you're already speaking my language, and I loved our pre-chat. So I know our audience is going to love this conversation. But before we get into that, everybody wants to know, how did you get into this crazy world of agency ownership and why?
Yeah. So 2003 was when I launched the agency, and we didn't call them agencies back then. It was a web design company, right? And depending on how old you are listening to this, like, you might not remember that time, because it was a time with Google was not the top search engine, Facebook wasn't around, YouTube wasn't a thing, nobody was carrying smartphones in their pocket. So it's safe to say AJ and I have seen a lot of change and development throughout the years, and it's been one of the most incredibly fulfilling and exciting spaces to be in this period of time. Like, right now is the best time in the history of the planet to own a web or digital marketing agency. Like, we're just so lucky, all of us, to be in this space right now to do this, because clients need our help. And I'll tell you what, in an environment where, maybe the economy isn't as bad, like, some people freak out about that, but I'll tell you what, every agency owner or digital marketer listening to this should love the fact that they get to jump in and help, because their services are so in demand. And I think that's a big reason we started this. There's people out there that, guess what? They don't know social media. They don't know how to glue things together and build websites and run Facebook ads or do any of those things. Like, as much as the world knows about that, there's so many people that need help. And that's why we do it. We just love to help folks learn, implement these strategies, so that way they can really, really benefit from them.
And why don't y'all tell me, I know you serve agencies, but tell me how you got into this whole serving agencies thing. I think that's a better question, right? Because we already know you serve agencies through Agency Coach, but tell me kind of the quick story of how this came about.
Yeah, 100%. So Agency Coach was born in 2016. Mike and I at that point were in a point at the agency where we felt like we had slayed a lot of the dragons. We'd accomplished a whole bunch. We weren't feeling too challenged. We wanted to learn more. We wanted to do more. We wanted to have more impact. And so we started thinking about, how can we serve the people that are just like us, right? Like, we love agency owners. We love talking shop. We love being around those types of people. And quite truthfully, like, as Mike and I grew the agency, we often wished that there was something like Agency Coach that could give us shortcuts and give us, ideas and give us strategies that we could rubber stamp and implement, instead of always constantly having to figure things out on our own. I think it took us a really long time to get the agency to a point where Mike and I could step both feet out of it. And if we would have had a mentor or somebody that was out there doing what we're doing for Agency Coach, that would have been a lot shorter amount of time.
Yeah. And God, this is such a timely topic. Literally, I had my mastermind call yesterday, and we were talking about monthly recurring revenue. Shout out Ron, Andy, and Rich. Hey. But can you share the strategy behind monthly recurring revenue? So if you're new to agency ownership, or maybe you're an agency marketer and you don't have to touch the numbers, lucky you. Monthly recurring revenue is often referred to as the acronym MRR. So you two figured out how to make an MRR model for marketing agencies that fundamentally changed how you and they approach business. So can you kind of break that down for us?
Yeah. So, the thing is that too many agencies live in what's called the feast or famine business cycle, right? It's periods of time where, and tell me if this sounds familiar, like, you have lots of cash, there's projects, there's people banging down your door, they're interested in working with you, right? And so the bank accounts are full, right? The project management tools are on fire, you're using them all the time, right? But what happens in that for a lot of agency owners and business owners in general, when they're busy, what they tend to stop doing is marketing. They tend to stop looking for the next project, or they're not quite as diligent about following up with the people that they could be doing business with. So they find themselves in a position that time marches on, the bank accounts start to dip a bit, the projects start to settle out, and time becomes a little more abundant, but they find themselves without the next client or project. And so now this famine cycle kicks in where you have a lot of time, but very little money and not sure where the next project's coming from. Now, this is a cycle that AJ and I lived in for a lot of years. And I'll tell you what, we actually got very, very good at running this cycle, right? This is a strength. I'm not proud of this, but we are very good at making a lot of money in a very short amount of time because there's a lot of pressure on us. And that's a tough spot to be in. It's not, and if anyone's experiencing burnout, consider that it could be because of this very cycle that exists. And I think a great story to illustrate this is a time that we sold one of the biggest projects in town. It was a casino. Right.
Yeah, 100%. So, at that time, I thought my job in sales for the agency was to go out there and find the biggest projects that I could possibly find. We sold websites for $5,000, then $10,000, then $20,000, then $50,000. And the casino happened to be the first project that was a 6-figure website project. And I'll tell you what, at that time, it took me 7 months, I think, to close that deal. And Mike and I were just high-fiving and we're super excited. And we're, getting out of this feast and famine cycle was something that we'd been wanting for a really long time. We didn't want to have to worry about payroll or any expenses or things that were going on in our agency. And we thought with this huge influx of cash that those days were over, right? And so, we knew we wanted to knock that project out of the park. We brought on additional resources. We worked really hard on it and we did that. The client was super happy. We won awards for it. And just fast forward a few months, when this thing was coming to an end, I start noticing something going on with our bank accounts and our balance sheet. We were basically right back to where we were before that project happened. And I remember talking to Mike, what the heck just happened? We just had the biggest project we've ever had in the history of our agency, right? And we totally crushed it. But now I feel like we're almost in the same exact position as we were just a few months ago. And I'll tell you, the worst part about it was me knowing that there wasn't another casino out there that I could just go get that next month, right? It's a horrible feeling when you have your best month, and we're always the type of guys that want to best our best, right? And just knowing that I can't best my month this month because there's not another 6-figure project that's hanging out there. And I remember going to our accountant and saying, hey, we need some outside perspective on this. Can you just tell us, where'd that money go? It seems like it just vanished, right? We made a bunch, it came in, I know it hit the accounts, but now I'm looking and it doesn't look like it's there anymore. And she ran a few different reports, but one of the things that she ran was a report that really changed our lives forever. It was a report of our top 20 customers over the past 4 years. And I remember getting the report and I went up to the top and I was wholeheartedly expecting the Casino del Sol to be the number one customer there. And guess what? They weren't even in the top 10. They barely even made the top 20, right? But guess who was up at the top? It was an orthodontist that had been paying us $2,000 a month for the past 4 years. Number two was an HVAC company that's paying us $1,800 for the past 4 years. And a dentist that was paying us $1,500 for the last 4 years, right? It was all these other types of businesses that were abundant and all around us, right? And here I was spending all of my time trying to find these big whales and these big projects that were pretty elusive, right? And tough to find. It took forever to close, when really what I should have been doing was just getting some of these smaller businesses that were all around me to pay us monthly on an ongoing basis. So instead of high-fiving the 6-figure deal, we should have been high-fiving the $2,000 a month deal that would just go on forever, right? And so in that moment, Mike and I are like, holy crap, we've got to change our strategy big time. I don't want to go after those big ones anymore. And I want those one-time upfront projects. I want something that I could sell and get paid on forever. And that's when we started marching towards that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you told this story, because I feel like most of us can relate to that. And really what you learn over time is that stability is the most important thing, right?
100%.
It's one thing when we're new and it's just us or it's just AJ and Mike, right? We can kind of be risky. But once we grow and we've got other people who rely on us, the biggest thing, the sexiest thing is stability, right? So let's talk about some of the challenges that you think agencies face, because I know you talk to a lot of them, when they're transitioning to the monthly recurring revenue or MRR model, and how can they navigate those challenges to get to an MRR model within their own agency?
Well, I'll start by saying, that stability that you mentioned is actually a mathematical equation, right? And for the math folks or the logic folks in the room, they love this, right? It's the stability or financial freedom is created when you have MRR, monthly recurring revenue, greater than your expenses, right? And when I first heard that, I was like, that's too simple. It must be harder than that. There's no way. But you think about it, it's like if I have more monthly recurring revenue stacked, right? Let's say it costs you like the money you put in your pocket every month. I'm going to pull 8 or 10 grand or 16 grand out of the business every month to run my life, or whatever that number is for you. Plus, I have the business expenses and utilities, insurance. Like what are all those expenses? I have team members. I have software subscriptions. I have all these things. I have conferences I go to, right? What is that number per month averaged out? That's your target. As long as your monthly recurring revenue is greater than that, then you have that stability, which is just mind blowing. Because now when we want to hire someone, or I'm going to go to this conference that I it's an added expense this month. I know I can do that because this makes I have the cash flow coming in, and I think that touching on your question, the challenge that a lot of people have is they don't realize how quickly monthly recurring stacks up. Like, here's a quick question, or like a mental exercise for us to go through. Have you ever looked at your bank statement that came at the end of the month, and you looked at the bottom, you're like, no way I spent that much money, because you're looking at each line item and you're like, there's no way that adds up. They're all this, here's $10 here and $15 and $100 there and $45 there. There's no way I spent that much money. But then you go and add it up, assuming the bank's wrong. Yeah, they must have made a mistake. No. The bank ain't wrong. Here's the thing. And our human brains don't compute this for some reason. Small numbers added up become a big number very quickly, right? And that sucks when you're looking at your bank statement and what you spent. But here's the thing: is you reverse that and look at how quickly recurring contracts that you sell to your clients, where your clients are paying you, add up. Life changes very, very quickly. And I think the challenge that most agencies experience is the doubt that their life can change with a complete focus on monthly recurring revenue. It can happen really, really quickly. That's what we walk people through in our world, and helping them see that shift and that transformation, not a year from now, not 2 years from now, but in these coming weeks and months, in transitioning that right away.
Yeah, I think what I'll tack onto that real quick, Brooke, is I think another big challenge that agencies face when they're trying to make this transition is they need to switch from what we call an order taker to a strategist, right? Like a lot of times agencies are trained that they need to do whatever the customer comes and asks them to do, right? Like, we're really resourceful people. They've got money in hand. We need money. And we're like, yes, we'll just do it. But the truth is, like, it was a false belief that we always needed to start with this huge website project up front. We started leading instead with the digital marketing services that were recurring and saying, well, you know what, your website, we could probably improve it a little bit, but do we really need to address that right now? And do we really need to do that first, right? Because that's what we were doing before. Everybody that came through the door were like, cool, we need to redesign your website first, right? Which was that huge upfront project. Sometimes that would then turn into recurring revenue for digital marketing services. Sometimes it wouldn't, right? Because they were kind of burnt out on going through that project. So instead we said, hey, your website's in a good spot. If you're coming to us because you want more customer activity, why don't we focus on things like SEO or pay-per-click or Facebook ads or all these other things that I think have a better opportunity to actually get you more customer activity in your business. And oh, by the way, those are the services we want to sell now, because they lean more towards that recurring nature that we're talking about.
Okay. I'm excited because I'm picking up what you're putting down, right? But let's say I'm somebody who's watching or listening, and I go off a project model, right? I don't have a subscription or a retainer model right now. Convince me. How do you convince me that I need to switch to an MRR model or a subscription model, and that there are proven strategies that will work for me?
Cool. Let's play with this for a minute, Brooke. So my question to you being the person that loves these fixed projects or these kind of retainer-based things, whatever you're referring to, what is it that you like about those?
I like that they're big, like the casino story. Like, right? I like the whales. I like the chase. I like chasing whales.
So you like the big cash, you like that check coming
Yeah.
in. And
Yeah.
so do you also experience times when that check doesn't come in? Does that, like, I get it too, I love big checks, but is there ever times in your life where that big check doesn't come?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you want more time? Do you want more of your life to be stable and consistent, or are you okay with the ebbs and the flows and the big wins? Or could you imagine a life where you could have both, right? Where you have lots of cash coming in, right? It's consistent, and then guess what? We got gravy, we got extra, right? Oh, this big project came in, and that one makes sense to charge this big thing, but our foundations are covered. Does that sound like a life you want to live, or do you like the ebbs and the flows, the feast and the famine?
I'll take both.
Yeah.
But also, how do you
Yes.
how do you convince the agency owners, right? I'm convinced. I want both, right? But how do you convince the agency owners to turn around and convince is it existing clients that they're convincing to turn into an MRR model, or is it just going after new? What does that look like?
It's kind of both, right? Like some of them have clients that they did a one-time project for. They did a website for that client, and now they're just kind of waiting for that client to ask for something else, right? That's another big problem is again, they're being that order taker instead of being the strategist. Oftentimes when people come into our world, they say the number one thing that they need is more leads. And if only they had more leads, all their problems would be solved. And when we start to really pull back the layers, it's like, gosh, you've built 50 websites over the last couple of years, right? But you're not doing anything else for those people. Do you think those people need SEO? Do you think they need help with their review and reputation management? Do they need help with pay-per-click and Facebook ads? And they're like, yeah, but they haven't really talked to me about any of that stuff. It's like, no, it's our job, right? As the strategist, like they're relying on you to kind of be their third party marketing strategy. And if you're not out there communicating to them the things that they could be doing to get more customers, then that's a disservice to that person, right? And so a lot of times it's not necessarily that we're convincing a client to switch. If they did a fixed bid project, that project probably has come and gone. It's more about, cool, how do we go back to the gold that's in your backyard and get the people that have already proven they know, like, and trust you and that they'll give you money? And how do we convince them to give you more money, selling them more things that you can do to help them out? And then for anybody coming in new, how do we lean more on those recurring services versus the upfront project stuff, which, don't get me wrong. We just got a message from somebody at our agency Anchorwave that said, hey, we've just sold a website. They paid 20K upfront cash, right? And we love those, right? Because that's nice. There's a nice cash inflection that goes in the business. But guess what? We also have all of our expenses and payroll paid. So that's just the icing on the cake at this point, right? And so you can have both 100%. And it's just about where you want to lean and where you want to kind of lead your clients to.
Yeah. And, one of the things that could be helpful, Brooke, if you want to go there with it, is, what we teach is something called the playbook. So if anybody's like worried or concerned about how do I actually sell recurring subscription services? We just did a training on it. And if you wanted to, I could share my screen and give you just a little bit of a show of that. And if not, we could also link that in the show notes too. Totally up to you.
Yeah, let's definitely link it in the show notes because I have like 700 questions.
Cool.
We don't have time for 700 questions, but
Awesome.
We will link it in the show notes for y'all. So if you are listening and not watching, head over to the YouTube channel. That is where everything's linked. And then eventually this will also become an article on Social Media Examiner's website where you can link from it there. So, okay, so you've convinced me. And let's say I'm a smart agency owner and I've called a couple of my clients and I've talked to them about this. And they've also said what you're saying, AJ, right? Like they're like, yeah, actually, I would like help with whatever it is. How do I then go about pricing this, right? And how do I keep the pricing attractive for both the clients that I have now who might buy into a recurring service and anybody who comes in that's new?
Yeah, that's a great question. Determining pricing or we try and reprogram a lot of our community's language into investment, because nothing you ever sell to your client should have a price or cost them anything, because what you do is actually providing them a return on their investment. So determining the investment on these things is really an important topic that I think it'd be awesome to dig into right now. So the reality is that too many agency owners are selling the work and they're doing all of the work themselves. And they end up in this kind of like jack of all trades situation where they're so busy doing all the work that they don't have time to do the other things, right? And the thing is, they want to delegate, right? They would love to delegate, but the big question that they have for themselves is, how do I afford to delegate, right? I'm like, money's coming in, I got bills, I got to pay myself, and the thought of me slicing some of that off to somebody else, I mean, they're probably going to charge me about what I'm charging my client. So like, does it make sense for me not to make any money? So they get in this trap. We talked about the feast and famine cycle. Well, another cycle people get trapped in is this trap of being the jack of all trades, where they're doing everything themselves and they're very resourceful, know how to do it, but they don't have the cash to actually do that. So determining the investment for the projects is really, really important, and they have to plan for those things. I think that when you're selling a commodity, right? Everyone's doing social media, everybody's doing websites, right? You start to get into this situation where you think, I can't charge more, right? And that there's an upper limit. I mean, truthfully, like we all have upper limits of what we think something the investment should be for something. And it's about trying to figure out how to push that further and further. One of my favorite stories was when AJ and I first met, before he had taken over a lot of the sales duties with me. I was selling and I had this upper limit of like, it didn't matter who came, but this website was always $6,000. Like, and it got to the point where he'd be like, oh, so what did you bid on that project? $6,000. I'm like, how did you know? He's like, well, that's what you always do, Mike. So we had this neuroscience center, beautiful Taj Mahal of a neurosciences, bunch of brain surgeons, in fact,
16 brain surgeons
got together and opened up this facility. And he says to me, Mike, we ain't bidding $6,000 on this. These guys, have you seen the building? Have you seen the equipment? Like, these guys can afford more. And he's like, we're going to charge more. And like, we ended up, I think it was like $20,000 or something like that. And I was like, well, what do we get to do different? And he's like, nothing. I'm like, oh. I said, okay, well then you're I made him do it. I was too nervous about it.
Yeah.
And so, and they bought it, and honestly, we probably underbid it still. And here's what the lesson in that is, that you deserve to be paid based off of the value that you provide and not the time that it takes. Right. And so if you find yourself selling based off of time or based off of a fixed amount, then what we need to work on is figure out how to help you and your client see that you have more value, and therefore you can charge more. One of my favorite things that happens in our community, and when I was selling regularly, I love this. Client would come to me and say, Mike, you guys were the most expensive. And I'd be like, in my mind, I'd be thinking, oh, right, here it comes. They're going to tell me no. And then they say, but we're still hiring you because nobody did what you guys did. Nobody explained the approach or was thoughtful about how they were going to be working with us. And it's super clear that you guys are the right choice. So we're hiring you anyway. And we expect big things from you guys. And I'm like, when they tell you that, you didn't leave any money on the table.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and that's, by the way, what that playbook process I talked about, that will be linked in the show notes. That's what that teaches you, how to sell based off of value, not time. And one other quick story, and I'll try not to talk too long. Business coach refers to me a web design project. It was one of his clients, and it was a concrete driveway company. I bid $1,400 on the project, and I was scared about doing it. It's like, and so I got the project, and I got a call from my business coach. I was assuming to congratulate me, but he's like, "Hey, Mike, I got to talk to you about something." I was like, "Hey, what happened?" He's like, "I had to convince them to hire you." I was like, "Well, what do you mean? Like they said yes." He's like, "Yeah, it was because of me. You want to know why they didn't want to hire you?" I said, "No, why?" He said, "You were too cheap. You were the cheapest bid that they got by far." And so here's what I had to say. I said, you know what, guys, Mike is awesome. He's going to do great work for you. He just doesn't know his value yet. Jump on this, because it's never going to be this price again. Never going to be it again.
Smart.
And so here's the thing. What if my business coach hadn't told me that and didn't convince them, and then they didn't hire me? And then I came to the conclusion that I was too expensive. And then the next project, instead of bidding $1,400, I'm like, oh, it's $900 now.
Right.
Like, imagine that happens all the time. And so agency owners, people in this space, you guys listening, you deserve to be paid based off of the value that you provide. And you provide us an insane amount of value. And if you need help figuring that out, like, I'd love to help you with that. Because as soon as that clicks in your brain, it's a mental thing. As soon as that clicks, your prices will raise. You'll feel good about it, and you'll be building monthly recurring revenue like you never had before.
I love it. AJ, let's get your intake. I don't know why I have intake forms on my mind. You've got me in like sales mode over here.
Yeah.
AJ, can you recommend any tools or technologies that help with this type of management, right? Or are there, I don't know, are there like best MRR tools, or is it just CRM? Like, how do y'all manage like the
Yeah.
logistical part of what you do?
Yeah, I think something it probably will kind of piggyback on some of the stuff that Mike was talking about, and maybe your last question a little bit, but it's this idea that we have of what we call leverage service partners. So I think one of the things that's broken with the way that agencies handle getting help delegating work is they do outsourcing, right? And I think a lot of people, when they think about outsourcing, they don't want to do it, and it's because they're doing it really wrong, right? They're saying, I do web design and I don't really know how to do SEO, or I don't want to do SEO. So I'm going to bring somebody on to help me with that. Right. And the way that they typically do that is, cool, I'm going to charge, that person's going to charge me $500 a month. So I'll charge $750. Right. And they're making a couple $100 on that. And they're like, they're not really excited about it. Right. Like, I'll tell you, one of the key things that agency owners need to understand is that they should always have the lion's share of the agreements that they have, because they're the ones that carry the risk and have the client relationship and everything else. And the way that you do that is by being more specific about what you're asking that person to do, right? If you're just saying, hey, do SEO, and you're leaving it up to them to come up in their mind with what they're going to do, then of course they're going to do what we do, right? They're going to pad it a little bit. They're going to be like, well, I don't know what he's really asking for, so I better say it's 500. But when you can get more specific about it and do what we did, which is create what we call agency productized recipes, and say, you know what? I need you to do 5 citations this month. I need you to write 2 blogs. I need you to do on-site SEO, right? And break it down into those smaller components. Then you can really sharpen the pencil on what it's costing you to get that stuff done. And so when I think about like the systems that we use to make this whole engine work, it's really looking at our services, breaking them down into smaller components, and then figuring out who's somebody that can do just that one piece, right? And when we do that, there's no wiggle room, right? Like, hey, how much is it to create 5 citations? They can be very clear and honest about that. And, when we piece all this stuff together, we end up with our service offering. Too many agency owners are selling the work than doing the work, right? And just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. And when you're thinking about like how to price stuff, you've got to price it with the idea that at some point you're not doing it, right? So if you're just leaving yourself just enough margin for you to make money, but you're the one that has to do it, then that's never going to work, right? Because at some point you're going to run out of your own time to sell, and then you're not going to be able to delegate into the work because there's just not enough money there to give it to anybody else, right? And so I think those are a couple of points that I wanted to touch on. Another is just the idea that this is not new, right? Like, this happens in a lot of other industries. A perfect example is like if you're building a custom home, right? You're not going to have one person that's the roofer that does the cabinets, does the electrical, does the plumbing, you're going to have different subject matter experts, and you're going to have a general contractor whose job it is to basically manage all those people to make sure they're getting the work done, right? And so really what we're doing is we're trying to be that general contractor in the agency and only bring in the resources that we need when we actually need them, right? And so that's kind of how the project management works with some of these stuff. These are just key components that I think are necessary for this type of agency to work. We used to throw bodies at all of the work that we did. We used to have a belief that we needed to have employees at our agency to get this work done. We had an SEO person, a Facebook person, a pay-per-click person. But guess what? Like, we don't always have enough work to fill a full-time person's, schedule. But they want to get paid every 2 weeks either way, right? Or like, there'd be times where like, our pay-per-click guys, like, I can't take on another account. Then we go get another one. And now it's not like we got double the amount of customers, right? It's like now they're each doing like half. And guess what? That's eating at our margin. So when you're operating in this leverage service model, I'm only giving our pay-per-click guy money when somebody just gave me money, right? And I know exactly how much I'm giving him, and I know exactly how much I got. So now I have a super predictable margin, and I can never lose on that. And so that's another key component of what we've done with this is been able to do that. We've also been able to negotiate really awesome rates with all these leverage service partners because we have buying power. That's another thing that we've borrowed from other industries where, let's say there's like independent tire companies. they all come together so they could have the same type of buying power as like a Walmart or
Yeah.
like a Costco. And so we can go to these providers and say, hey, not only do we need your help for AnchorWave, but we have this whole community of other agencies that we're also going to recommend you to. So, can you give us a better rate on that? And we've been able to negotiate really low rates for that stuff. And so all of that stuff contributes to, having consistent recurring revenue, having people that could do it. So it's not always on the owner to do the work, and still make the lion's share of the revenue from the contracts that you're bringing on.
I love that. And I love the buying power piece. That makes so much sense. But as you were talking, I started thinking, other than revenue, how do I know, again, like I'm the guinea pig agency here. How do I know that this is working and that I'm seeing success, right? Like, are there any other metrics that I should measure besides revenue that helps me understand success and sustainability, right? That I can keep doing this and should keep doing this.
Yeah, I think there's a couple key things that I like to look at. And if you were to divide them into two halves, there's everything that's happening on the sales side, and then there's what's happening on the service delivery side of your business. And the sales side is pretty straightforward. Like what I look at, and when we're putting a plan together to build and stack more recurring revenue for ourselves or somebody we're working with, we're looking at how many opportunities per week are you getting to get in front of a client, right? So if you think about your own calendar, or whoever's listening, think about your own calendar. How many times this week have you met with somebody that you could do business with, right? How many times last week, the week before, right? Think back to your best month ever, right? And then go look at your calendar and say, what happened that week and the weeks leading up to that? I'll bet you that in those best weeks and best months that you had a certain pattern of activity when it came to having conversations with people, right? And now maybe that pattern was just by accident, that you just had you have a word of mouth business, and it just all came in at that time, right? But the question is, how can we create consistency in your lead flow, in your sales conversations? Our saying is, IDs, which is what we call initial discussions or discovery calls, like the first conversation with the client. IDs get playbooks, right? Playbooks is the proposal. ID gets playbooks, and playbooks get closed recurring revenue, right? And recurring revenue stacks and stacks until monthly recurring revenue is greater than expenses, and then you have stability, financial freedom, right? So those are the metrics we look at. It's very simple. Like we should be able to plan, on average, how many IDs, initial discussions, should you have per week? And that makes it way easy, right? As opposed to all these, dashboards and CRMs and things that we can look at. Like there's so much. We get overwhelmed by the data sometimes, right? Even though like a lot of us, like we live in that all day, but even for our own businesses, it's just very simple. How many conversations? What's your goal, right? And maybe for folks listening, it's like, I want to have 2 solid conversations every single week. Because I know if I have 2 across the course of the month, if there's 4 weeks, that's 8 conversations. I should close probably 3 to 4 of those, right? And if 3 or 4 of those turn into $1,000 each per month, then I'm adding $3,000 to $4,000 a month in recurring revenue every single month. And after a year, we can do the math and really feel how that stacks up. And so rather than trying to be, how do I build $100,000 recurring revenue or whatever? It's like, no. Let's not focus on that. Let's focus on how many IDs this week. And then now, if you're not having those IDs, we get to have a conversation about how can we make that really easy? How can we create those things happening and those things showing up on your calendar and get people, you not begging people to work with them, actually them raising their hand and saying, hey, Brooke, I need your help. And I want to talk to you about that. Right. And them coming to you. So like that, if we can just focus on that metric by itself, everything else really kind of flows. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love it. And it makes so much sense because, I'm in a long time life ago, I worked in nonprofit and I was responsible for raising close to $1 million a year. Wow. And that feels insurmountable, right? It feels like crazy, but you have to break it down into manageable chunks, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm a big picture person. I don't know if you've done EOS, but I'm a visionary. So it's hard for me sometimes to look at the details. I'm like a move fast and break things person. But I had to start to look at the details, especially when there's like a big number in front of me, because otherwise I get too scared. And I get too, like you were saying, I get like in my head. I'm like, oh my God, this is impossible. I'm never going to be able to pull this off. Can you give any examples or case studies? You don't have to mention them by name, but What are some examples that you might have had working with some agencies who've seen explosive growth due to implementing this MRR model? And what do you think our audience could learn from them?
Yeah, probably the biggest one that comes to mind is a guy named Jason, who was literally a rock star. Like, he toured around the world. He was a drummer. He played in bands that you've probably heard of. But he was just starting a family and realizing that he didn't want to be on the road anymore, right? And so the first thing that he got in on with us was a course that was our flagship course, Review Pro Launchpad. It taught either agencies or people getting into the agency world how to help clients get more 5-star reviews on like Google and Facebook and so forth.
Yeah.
And so I remember he said he actually started watching that webinar while he was boarding a plane, and then it didn't have Wi-Fi, and he's like, oh man, like, cause he's like super into it, ended up landing and like immediately like got it going again and bought that. And it just blew up for him. He immediately brought on a bunch of clients, helping them with that one thing. It's an amazing foot in the door because not a lot of people are out there talking about that, right? Like, most people lead with like, I'll help you with SEO or I'll help you with the website. No one's really out there, hey, let me help you get more reviews. And the truth is, like, a lot of business owners know that's important. They've tried to get them on their own. They haven't been successful. And so him going out there and leading with that quickly got him a whole bunch of clients. Now, he's been the perfect student because then he did what we said, which was take all of those people that you got your foot in the door with and got a quick win for, and then start to stack on SEO and pay-per-click and all these recurring revenue services.
Mm-hmm.
And what was cool about him is within a couple of years, he hit $1 million annual in his agency with one other employee. One W-2 employee. I know. So it just goes to show like how scalable this model is. You know, he did have a couple other leverage service partners that were acting out in that capacity I described earlier, where, you know, they were SEO service providers where he brought somebody on, he'd pay them. But he really only had the one customer facing position, which was just the digital marketing coordinator that was helping him to manage those accounts and manage those third party leverage service partners. But yeah, it's just a testament to how this machine works, right? We teach them how to get the foot in the door with a quick win product like reviews. Then we teach them how to use our sales process to stack on more and more recurring revenue over and over and over again. He mentioned that there was this one client he brought on for reviews that ended up turning into like a $10,000 a month client, just with one client, right?
Wow.
And, you know, that's where it could start. And we hear these stories all the time, you know, in our world. And it's just a matter of following the process and following the steps, and it can happen that quick.
Ugh, so good. That gets me excited because it's just like you were saying earlier, like when I was pretending we survive on MRR over here at B Squared, but when I was pretending like we didn't, that's the glory of it, right? Like you have that stability, but you can still go out and land the whales too, right?
100%.
Which as you mentioned, one of you mentioned earlier, when you get those big clients, it was you, AJ, you were talking about the casino and you said it took 7 months to close. Yeah, big clients are great, big brands are great, but that pipeline is long.
It's a slow process. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, so last question, and I would love if both of you could just share your top piece of advice. But if we're looking ahead and we want to provide the agency owners who are watching or listening the satisfaction, the reassurance that this MMR model is going to remain competitive for them and can adapt to the market, right? Past couple of years, not so great. Before that, great, right? What would be your one piece of advice for each of you?
Yeah, so I think for me, you know, what we've talked about here isn't anything new. And if you've paid attention, you've seen a lot of smarter companies than us make this shift as well. Remember when you had to buy like all Adobe products like Photoshop up front? And then one day they're like, no, we're not doing that anymore. Now you just pay monthly forever, right? QuickBooks. I used to work at Intuit and do support for QuickBooks. You used to have their products that were like $300-400 you'd buy every couple of years. Then they switched to like, no, it's $30 a month, right? The local car wash here, right, in town, like they don't even do the pay as you go. They do, pay us $20 a month for unlimited car washes.
Yes.
Razors, Dollar Shave Club, right?
Barber shops are doing it.
Yeah,
right?
barber shops are doing it. So like you see it all around you, and it's because it works, right? There's a reason for that. That stacks and stacks and stacks. I think, you know, we've had agency owners come into our world and be a little bit resistant to it and be like, no, I can't take $1,500 right now when I could have got 20 grand. You know what I mean? Like that
Right.
doesn't make sense to me. But when you ask them, well, how much time could you take off before your agency just goes straight into the ground, right? If you're always having to be out there getting those big sales each and every month, and if you're starting every single month at basically zero, then a lot of times the answer is not very long, right? Like they could go maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. If they could go a month, that's amazing. In this model, like we could go a really long time, right? Without being in there, because not only has this provided that stability, but our team's been able to continue to run with it and run with this machine that we've built and built even higher levels of recurring revenue.
Mike?
Awesome. Yeah, I'd say a little bit of a repeat what I said before. This is the best time in the history of the planet to own a web or digital marketing agency. And if you're feeling like that's not true, I'd invite you to join a room or get around people who are doing big things. I think I'm kind of fortunate that in the 2008 recession, like I wasn't watching the news. I was so focused on my business. Like I knew crazy stuff was going on, but I'll tell you what, we grew right during that time. And I didn't realize why. The reason why, because there was all these other businesses who were freaking out, who needed somebody like me to show them the way. And that's what's happening. That's what happens in every market, but especially in a down market. And so if you're not believing that that's true right now, or that you're worried about that, get your, whatever you're watching or listening to, just delete that, cull your social media feeds and start unfollowing people and start following folks who are believing this is possible. Because guess what? There's always going to be a bigger agency than yours. There's a bigger agency than ours by many factors, right? If they can exist and they could be that big, why is there not growth for us even in a down market? And so the biggest piece of advice I could say is, your success is what's happening around your beliefs and happening in your mind. And if your beliefs are not serving you, well, then put yourselves around people. You listening to this podcast right now and hanging around the marketing agency show and listening to Brooke is a great example of that. Fill your brain with the good stuff, delete the bad stuff. And if we can help delete some of that and put some good stuff in your brain, we'd love to help too.
Well, obviously, I totally agree with that. But truly, that's why we have guests like you on, is because there is no playbook. It does seem hard. It's been hard since COVID for a lot of us. And I want people like Mike and AJ to open up this curtain and share with people like, hey, yeah, it's hard, but if you do this or follow this plan, you can get through it. So I just love all of the advice that y'all have given. And I know people are going to want to connect with you and find out more about the playbook and everything that y'all do. So where can everyone connect with you? Where can they find you? Where can they find that playbook? All the things. Where should people go?
Yeah. So it turns out there is a playbook for this, and we've got it, and the folks in our community are using it to crush it. And I'd love to show you that exactly. And we've got a training that will walk you through that, show you our 2-step sales process, help you understand how to sell based off of value and not time, how to build recurring revenue. And it's actually a case study of how our own agency has passed over $200,000 a month in recurring revenue. So come and check it out. Yes, huge applause, because we're celebrating like mad over here. So I'd love to share that with you guys. If you head over to agencycoach.com/marketing agency show, you guys can grab that, a link straight to it, and you can watch it. And if there's something you guys want to reach out to myself, find me on Instagram at Mr. Mike Schmidt, and I'm always on my DM. So just send me a message and we'll say hello.
Awesome. I know I'm going to go run over to that special link and grab myself a playbook. Even though we do MRR, right? This is why I love the show too. Like, I'm always learning something. So really appreciate y'all coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge with everyone around monthly recurring revenue. And y'all, really, truly, go consider this. Go look at their playbook. Figure out how to get yourself in that sustainability part where you can still go chase whales.
Love it. Thanks, Brooke.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.